So, Ilhan Omar faces backlash from a speech that she made yesterday by Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn. In that speech, Ilhan called for a lot of equality and made some other quote unquote Marxist remarks, such as this.
But we can't stop at criminal justice reform, or policing reform for that matter. We are not merely fighting to tear down the systems of oppression in the criminal justice system. We are fighting to tear down systems of oppression that exist in housing, in education, in healthcare, in employment, in the air we breathe.
Now, this goes on to talk about the race inequality, which Marsha Blackburn definitely could have went on and said that's a bit tone deaf. That Ilhan Omar kind of omitted the white people in that, and it was somewhat racist. But that's not what Marsha Blackburn said. Marsha Blackburn actually said Omar and her Marxist comrades are a threat to our democracy. Omar should resign. Which I really question Marsha Blackburn's understanding of Marxism. I say that because of what capitalism, which is quote unquote our current system, and what Marxism or communism actually is, and the difference of those. Let's look at this. Now, capitalism, hands off approach, faith in the market, competition leads to improvements. Does that sound like the situation we have here? Not really. Um, who determines the price? The people. Does that sound like. No, not really. Who determines supply? People. Who determines demand? The people. One could argue demand is the only thing that we have that is capitalism here in America. Because when you look at the other side and you notice communism, class struggle. Yeah, we know class struggle. We definitely know class struggle here. We have the lower class or the poverty class, which, by the way, it's not good to say lower class anymore. It's better that we're just poverty class, the middle class, and the ruling class. Every one of us knows exactly where the hell we are, and it's not anywhere near the ruling class. The haves and the have nots. Well, the fact that we know what classes are because we live in them, we know what the haves and have nots are. Government regulation. You look no further than the CARES Act to show the government regulation. The way that the government has regulated who lives and dies, who succeeds and who fails. The SBA showed the loan recipients and who seemed to get them? People that were well connected. Who didn't get them? Small businesses on Main Street. Does that sound like free market to you? Doesn't sound that way to me. Let's talk about determine who determines the price. Well, ask any small business owner, ask any restaurateur. They will tell you the taxes that we have to pay determines the price. Unless, of course, you have a lobbyist on K Street who is actively in the pocket of politicians lowering your tax. But for a lot of us, we don't have that. So, yes, their high taxes on us definitely regulate and determine our price. Who determines the supply? You might say, look, I got you there. It's the people. It's not the government, at least. The government definitely does not affect your supply chain. I would agree with you, except for they shipped all of our manufacturing jobs offshore. And no matter how many they say that we claimed or we reclaimed, the reality is we get as much as we lose every year. For the last 3 decades, you can actually look that as soon as we get a handful, we lose 2 handfuls. Every other year, it's the same thing. This is easily trackable, and I've shown you in the last video that it's almost clockwork that we will get a good amount of manufacturing jobs and then lose more than that in about 2 years. So, yes, the government determines who it is. And finally, demand. This one is kind of tricky because it may not be government who actually determines demand, but it is corporations. And I say that with one corporation in mind, and that is Amazon. Because if you're a small business and you sell online using Amazon and you're doing well, they will simply buy you out. Or they will hide you until you don't make any sales, and then they'll buy you out and they'll steal your product. To go further into the definition of capitalism, and not moving far from Amazon, let's look at competition. What competition do we have in this country? We have about 10 major companies who have consolidated to kill competition. In fact, if you wanted to start your own Wi-Fi company right now, you'd have a hard time doing it. You'd have to pay the $250,000 registration fee and then pass all sorts of uh, applications. And finally, after about $2 billion invested, you might be certified to have your own company. Let's just take the average motorcycle enthusiast who happens to be a really good mechanic. Well, first, he has to get a degree. He has to get some form of education. If he doesn't, he can't call himself a mechanic. He can't work on vehicles legally. Even though this man probably had done it better than most of the others. And that's fine. I get it. He should be certified. Well, why not have a course in which this guy can just open up his own shop and pass this course? And it should be a free course. No, that's not the way that works, does it? And I'm not even getting into all the business applications that he has to fill and the loan he's going to need, which he probably won't get. This is one small example of how there is no free market in America. And it makes me irritated that someone like Marsha Blackburn calls Ilhan Omar, AOC, their comrades, Marxists, when she doesn't call out the country that we live in for losing the American dream. Because what Ilhan Omar and AOC and many of them are advocating for is more equality. They're not saying, hey, the government should decide who gets what and who doesn't get what. In fact, Ilhan Omar is ranting to the government for deciding these things. Ilhan Omar is saying the government shouldn't decide who are the haves and have-nots. They shouldn't be in the pocket of K Street and the lobbyists. It's not right that Jeff Bezos pays more taxes than you do, or pays less taxes, I'm sorry. He pays zero, you pay actual taxes. This has all been the plight of Ilhan Omar and AOC, and I admit it was tone deaf that she did talk about white Americans having more than black Americans and not going into class. That was completely tone deaf, and I'm sure that she regrets making that statement without the caveat of talking about classes. And I can assure you, because she tweeted about it, it's not my point. My point is, all we see is these big centrist politicians on both sides of the aisle claiming people are communists or Marxists every time they push against the system that we're currently in, even though this system is exactly that. For instance, there was a CEO, he's a philanthropist, and I forgot his name. He has a very odd name. But Thala, yeah, I can't pronounce it. But anyway, he was on CNBC, and after he made the statements that he made, he received a ton of backlash, namely from politicians, centrists, neo-libs, neocons, those type. And I'll play how that went out.
But are you suggesting, you keep saying propping up zombie companies. Are you arguing to let airlines, for example, fail?
Yes.
Why? I mean, how does that make sense in the broader scheme of the economy?
Because it's not, because when you look at what it means, this is why I'm saying, like, this is a lie that's been purported by Wall Street. When a company fails, it does not fire their employees. It goes through a packaged bankruptcy, right? If anything, what happens is the people who have the pensions inside those companies, the employees of these companies, end up owning more of the company. The people that get wiped out are the speculators that own the unsecured tranches of debt or the folks that own the equity. And by the way, those are the rules of the game. That's right, because these are the people that purport to be the most sophisticated investors in the world.
And that makes complete sense, especially when you're looking at capitalism. You have the freedom to try to make it work, but guess what? You also have the freedom to fail. There is no such thing as too big to fail. We let companies fail under capitalism. Under communism is when you don't let companies fail, at least certain companies, your hand-picked companies, the ones that are connected to politicians. Your small businesses, no, you'll tax them to death and not give them a hand up ever while helping Jeff Bezos and Boeing and Raytheon, Enron, all of them. And in fact, many of those companies I just mentioned, which are some of the biggest in our country, get just straight taxpayer money. In fact, wouldn't be nearly as big as they are if they didn't get taxpayer money. They add it straight to their profit margin. Small businesses can't do that. No. I push up against someone like Marsha Blackburn who makes such a dumb comment, namely because of something that the Fed chair said. When he said no economic impact from the Fed pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into Wall Street each week makes a difference. It's not going to hurt us, was his entire point. But that's funny because when AOC, or even myself, pushes for free education, to wipe our education debt, uh, universal health care, something that I think we're all realizing right now is not a good idea that it was tied into our jobs, or raising the minimum wage, giving us universally a living wage. All of these things, they say, no, 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 we can't do that. Think about how that's going to affect the bottom line. Can you imagine the inflation, the hyperinflation, all of that they come at us with? We just can't do that. It'll affect the market too much. But yet, when we pump hundreds of billions of dollars into Wall Street, that doesn't affect inflation at all, does it? Interesting. Interesting that when money goes to helping the average American, oh, we can't do it. It's going to cause problems. But when it goes into Wall Street, when it goes into the ruling class, we just have to do it. We have to do it because that's preserving the American way. I say it's preserving communism, a communism that we currently already live under. And anyone who truly believes, after looking at all the facts, thinks that we are still a capitalist nation, you have to be lying to yourself because that's not where we're at anymore. And we haven't been for a very, very, very long time, if ever at all. I refer to Smedley Butler quite often on this show, for he was the one who first talked about this kind of corruption over well, yeah, about 100 years ago when he wrote War is a Racket. He talked about the profiteering that he saw back in 1918. 1918, he was killing people in other countries for the sake of the profits of American companies. He already knew what the rest of us are just finding out now. And how long has that been going on? How long has there always been special interest groups? People who have had their thumb on the scale, that have completely manipulated the American dream or the idea of a pursuit of happiness. We don't know, and we will never know if we ever actually had a real shot at making capitalism work. But I can tell you this, that when people like Marsha Blackburn go after Ilhan Omar for equality and don't call out the CARES Act, she's just adding into the propaganda that what we have right now is a better system and is a system that is worth keeping. And that, to me, is a true friend of communism and Marxism. You can argue all you want that you don't agree with AOC or Ilhan Omar, and that's fair. I'll take that. But when you so viciously go after their ideology, and maybe not even viciously, maybe I should say moronically, go after their ideology of communism, when you don't understand communism and you believe that what we have is capitalism. No, because it seems like if anything, of the isms that they're trying to support would be democratic socialism. Maybe. Even then, I argue with that. They want a jobs program, a federal jobs program, one that you can opt out of if you want by just getting a regular job, working at Amazon. But if you can't, the government pays you to build a bridge. Isn't that a little bit better than our money going to Wall Street? I don't know. I think it's kind of a better idea. But anytime ideas like that are spurred up, they're socialists, they're communists, they're Marxists. No, all of our money should go to a few select companies, selected by our most highest ranking politicians, that is, not the American people. It seems to me that either politicians like Marsha Blackburn are either brainwashed or are really good at putting a propaganda spin on everything.